I want to talk about deck theory.
I don't mean that literally. Hey, how you doing, Ibringter? What I mean is, I want people to really think about how their decks work, and if your deck is good enough to be in play. And a lot of it just comes down to what staples you're using. How powerful are the staples you are using? This engine or this deck is a very capable deck. It's pretty good, but a lot of my wins were secured by these two cards up here, the Maxi and the Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. If you are playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, I'm going to tell you this now. Do not tell yourself, I hate the meta. I don't want to play meta, so I'm not playing any of those cards. They're broken. I think that your deck should probably just automatically have these 8 cards. Called by the Grave, Maxi, and Ash Blossom. Unless you are playing something very funky that cannot fit them. Or your deck doesn't lose to hand traps, so you don't have to worry about these. I think these are auto concessions for every single deck. For the most part. Having some Jazz Cabbage while taking a little break off EFT. What is EFT? What is EFT? Is this a D's Nut setup? Escape from Tarkov. Oh, okay. Cool. Nice. So recently, on a 14 win streak, I made it to Platinum with Magical Musketeers. The February 2022 season, the first full season of Master Duel, right? Because January was not a full month. It is February 10th. It happened February 9th, so I got it in 3 days. 2 days. 2 days technically, because I didn't really get to play for a few days. So let's just go over the list. This is a card for card stealable list. Still my list. I don't care. That's fine. Right. First off, let's go with the non-engine cards. We have Maxi. During either player's turn. If you play Master Duel, I'm assuming you know what Maxi does. I'm not gonna explain Maxi. I'm not gonna explain Ash. I'm sure you know what Ash does. And I'm not going to explain Raigeki, board clear, Harpy's Feather Duster, board clear, and Monster Reborn. Grave, Recursion. I won't explain any of these cards. I also won't explain the Called by the Graves, which essentially just allows you to DD Crow or remove a hand trap from your opponent's graveyard on activation to negate that monster's effect and allow you to continue to play through said hand trap. If you steal my list, that's fine. I want people to steal my list. It's very stock. We'll get into the Magical Musket cards now. Starting with 3 Caspar. During either player's turn, you can activate Magical Musket spells and traps from your hand. This effect is shared for all the Magical Musket monsters. Every single one of them has the exact same effect. This is your starter. This is probably your best starter next to Starfire, which we'll get into. Level 3 Fiend, 2000 attack, 2000 defense, 1200 attack. If a spell or trap card is activated in this column except during the damage step, you can add 1 Magical Musket card from your deck to your hand, but not a card with the same name as the activated card. I can't if I don't even play. You should play. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is pretty fun. So, essentially, for every spell or trap you or your opponent activate in this card's column, once per turn, you get to add a different Magical Musket card from your deck to your hand, which is really good. It makes it so that if you clog up the board with Magical Musket monsters while your opponent is playing the game, they are giving you additional Magical Musket effects. I played this deck very going second, so that didn't really come into play a lot, but I've seen a lot of people play this as going first list. The other starter, Starfire. During your player's turn, you can activate Magical Musket cards from your hand, right? Doesn't look interesting? That's fair. You can special summon 1 level 4 or lower Magical Musket monster from your deck in defense position except Starfire. You can only use this effect once per turn if a spell or trap is activated in this card's column. So this essentially gets you whatever other Magical Musket monster you need straight out of your deck. Usually it'll probably be a Caspar, right? If you start off with Starfire instead of Caspar, this is going to be the next thing that you're going to get. And then for the last of the main Magical Musket monsters, it's Doc. Same starting clause, but if a spell or trap is activated in this card's column, you get to add 1 Magical Musket card from your graveyard to your hand, but not with the same name as the activated card, right? And the reason why they put that is because they don't always expect you to use, generic draw spells and board clears and monster reborns to trigger the effects of these Magical Musket monsters. So they don't want you activating one of your Magical Musket cards and then getting back the same copy of said card. They want you to have to rotate through your spells and traps. Another thing is, for the most part, you usually don't want to get the same card back because they're all hard ones per turns. The last 2 Magical Musket monsters are Kid Brave. This is essentially Destiny Draw. You discard a Magical Musket card and draw 2 cards. If you have like a hand filled with monsters, like say you clogged on monsters, and you get like a Kid Brave and a Starfire, like a Kid Brave and a Doc on the field, or a Kid Brave and a Caspar on the field, you want to just get rid of those monsters to draw more gas, right? Which is good. But if you have spells or traps, you probably just want to hold on to the spells or traps. The last one is just another literal monster reborn. During either player's turn, you can activate Magical Musket cards in its column, spells or traps at least. And if a spell or trap is activated in this card's column, you can target 1 Magical Musket monster in your graveyard, put summon in defense position. This is really good. It doesn't bring back the Link monster, but it brings back anything else in your strategy. Also, Calamity is cute as hell. Very good card. Very, very good card, but not something you want to have to rely on in like a best of 1 setting. This is like Grave Recursion that you end up only using towards the end of a game. I was also playing the other Magical Musket monsters at 1 each, but then I ended up cutting them along with the worst spell and the worst trap. I like to make sure that the cards I'm playing are the good cards. Pinkertops helps you blow board. Good card. Let's move on to the draw spells. 3 Upstart Goblin. Draw a card. Your opponent gains 1,000 life points. This card is actually a break even. This is a break even. You trade 1 for 1 on card economy, but you make your deck 37 cards essentially by playing 3 Upstart Goblin. And you also allow easier triggers for all of your Magical Musket monsters. If you draw one of these and you draw a Caspar, that's all gas, right? Say you draw a Pot of Desires, which banishes 10 from the top of your deck, which can sometimes be a problem. I ran into a few games where I was playing against decks where I really wanted to get my resource loop going, and I ended up banishing both my dots, or I ended up banishing all 3 of my Caspars off of something like the Pot of Desires. But for the most part, usually as long as you can get a Doc or a Starfire online and just draw into the rest of your Magical Musket cards, you should be fine. For the last like that is the last non-engine card. Wow, yeah. So we play 6 draw spells, which all also proc our Magical Musket cards, and one's a draw 1, one's a draw 2. So essentially you can go plus off of your draw spells, which is really good. You go break even off of any spell that interacts, or I guess you go plus because you're interacting with your opponent in some way, right? When you really think about it. And you go plus 2. You go plus 1 and plus 2 off Pot of Desires or Upstart Goblin, which is very, very cool. Into the Magical Musket spells and traps, Cross Dominator. If you control a Magical Musket card, which you have to activate all of them, so that first line of text is very important. If you cannot stick a Magical Musket monster, this deck does not work. It doesn't play. So sometimes, even when you don't want to, are you reviewing other people's decks? No, I'm showing the decks that I've made it to platinum with. Even when you don't want to, sometimes you have to activate a Pot of Desires or an Upstart Goblin before you start your plays, which gives you a neutral or a +1 instead of a +2. Or a +1, right? Because of the fact that you really want to just see a monster. If you can see a Starfire or see a Caspar and any number of spells and or traps, you're probably fine to play the game, right? The Cross Dominator, just know that all these Magical Musket cards have this first part. If you control a Magical Musket monster, you have to control a Magical Musket monster. Target 1 face-up monster on the field until the end of this turn, changes attack to defense, its attack and defense to 0. And it has its effects negated. You can only activate 1 Cross Dominator per turn. Okay, this is a Magical Musket card, which means that it's searchable and recurable off Doc and Caspar, respectively. And yeah, pretty good. It works as a hand trap, which is really sick, as long as you have a Magical Musket monster. Usually you want to activate it under something like a Doc or a Caspar for the most value, so you can get additional cards after using it, right? It can also be used during the damage step, which most effect negation can't, because of the fact that it has stat modulation. Because this card has stat modulation, you can use it during the damage step, which makes it very, very powerful. The next card is Magical Musket Desperado. If you control a Magical Musket monster, target 1 face-up card on the field, destroy it. You can only activate 1 Magical Musket Desperado once per turn. This is Dryden, this is Raigeki Break, this is Dark, this is Tribute to the Doomed. Right, this is that style card, that 1-for-1 trade with a pop, right? But whenever you think about how the Magical Muskets work, you're usually getting a plus off of your opponent's minus, making your card economy just skyrocket, right? So this card pops a card on your opponent's field and also usually nets you another card in some way or another, which is very good. The next card we have is Dancing Needles. If you control a Magical Musket monster, target 3 cards in graveyards. They can be yours or your opponent's, so last ditch effort up to 3. A last ditch effort to just get something started. You can banish cards from your own graveyard or your opponent's, even if you don't need to. Banish those targets. You can only activate one Magical Musket Dancing Needle per turn. Very good. I think this card's like super strong. I think the best thing about this card is the fact that normally you're using it against decks, and the reason why I play 2 is because you're using it against decks like Tri-Brigade, which you can completely cut off of their power cards like Revolt, or you're cutting off decks like Eldritch, where they put the cards into their graveyard, hoping to be able to use them at their own leisure to banish them to get new cards, and you just banish them with Dancing Needle. Also, any like grass style decks, Burning Abyss decks, mill decks of any kind, Dancing Needle really comes in clutch against decks like that. As a matter of fact, I used a Dancing Needle to stop a Tri-Brigade Revolt, and then the next turn I just added it back to my hand off a dock, and the guy just scooped. So this is a very powerful card. We have 2 other Magical Musket cards. The rest of the extract doesn't really matter too much. I'll tell you guys the cards that I do think really matter in the extract, and a few of them came out, but not really. So the last 2 cards are 2 copies of Magical Musket Last Hand. If your opponent activates a spell or trap while you control a Magical Musket monster, and to get the activation, if you do destroy that card, you can only activate 1 Magical Musket Last Hand once per turn. This is one of the strongest counter traps to ever exist. It only stops spells and traps, which is a little unfortunate. But it can be activated straight from the hand as long as you control a Magical Musket monster, and it usually nets you an additional card in some way or another. This card, not in a vacuum, in the Magical Musket strategy is so powerful. Absolutely love this card. This card beat a few evenly matched, beat a Mirror Force or 2, it beat some Torrential Tributes, it beat big board wipes like Raigekis, and it beat Pot of Extravagances and Pot of Prosperities, Desires. This card did a lot of work. I really like this card. And the last card is Crooked Crown. If you ever get clogged up on monsters and you don't have the Kid Brave to get rid of them, you activate this Crooked Crown. You can only control 1 Crooked Crown. Unfortunately, it clogs up the zone, so make sure you're able to get that monster out of the zone after you do that. During the main phase, which means even during your opponent's turn, you can special summon 1 Magical Musket monster from your hand, and if you do, if your opponent's main monster zone in that card's if that column is unused, it cannot be used until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. You can only activate the effect. You can only use this effect of Magical Musket Crooked Crown once per turn. And because you can only control 1 Crooked Crown, they don't have to worry about you activating multiples of these per turn. So that's kind of how they balance this. This doesn't actually have a hard once per turn on it, but you can only control 1, so it doesn't matter. Same with the other trap, but we aren't playing it. This card came in clutch a lot of times, right? So sometimes I'd end up with like hands like Caspar Dock, and then like a spell, like an Upstart or Desire. So I would like activate Caspar, I would summon Caspar, activate the draw spell or whatever, get Crooked Crown into a zone where there was nothing at, activate the dock, you know, activate something on the dock, get back whatever card I had used to start breaking their board, like the Desperado or the Dancing Needle or the Last Stand or Cross Dominate or whatever it may be. And I think that this card is perfectly serviceable as a one-up, but it's not really something you want to play multiples of. Now, the main reason why this deck, it seems very control-oriented, and it is, but this is a very interesting control deck because it can also go second very effectively, and the reason for that is its boss monster, which isn't really a boss monster. It's actually just an extra deck resource monster. Most of these cards in the extra deck do not fucking matter. The ones that came up were Nightmare Unicorn, Nightmare Phoenix, Tornado Dragon, Utopia/Utopia the Lightning, Nightmare Cerberus. So almost all of the links except for Access Code Talker and Boral Soul Dragon. I will say that Access Code Talker is probably a lot better if you play effectively in your deck, but I couldn't really find room and I don't want to craft them. But the Star card, so good. It's so good. God, I wish I was playing 3 because there was times where it came up. Even on a 14 game win streak, there was times where this card came up. So I wish I had a third, right? Magical Musketeer Max. To Fiend, link 1, 1,000 attack, 1 level 8 or lower Magical Musket monster. If this card is linked summon, you can activate one of these effects. Add Magical Musket spells or traps with different names from your deck up to the number of from your deck to your hand up to the number of monsters your opponent controls. Cool. So if your opponent controls a lot of monsters, you can get a lot of Magical Musket spells or traps. Or vice versa, which is going to come in a lot against other backer decks, because this is essentially a backer deck, or Eldritch. Special summon Magical Musket monsters with different names from your deck up to the number of spells and traps your opponent controls. You can only use this effect of Magical Musketeer Max once per turn. During either player's turn, you can activate Magical Musket spells or trap cards from your hand. So even if this is the only Magical Musket monster you have on the field, if you search for traps, if You go +4 and search 4 traps, you can activate them, right? If you get a Dancing Needle, a Desperado, a Last Stand, and a Cross Dom, you can do it. If you get a Crooked Crown, a Desperado, a Last Stand, and a Steady Hands, if you were playing it, you can do that, right? Because Max also has that same clause, because all of them do. This also allows you to link climb very effectively, because it does not say that those monsters cannot be used as link materials. So if you have a handful of spells and traps already, and you can get a Max to stick, then you can activate Max's effect to summon a lot of monsters and continue to try to break your opponent's board. This deck is very good at going second and significantly worse at going first with its actual engine cards themselves, and you have to rely on a lot more of your draw spells, right? So if you're gonna play a going first version of this deck, you need more cards that are gonna plus you or break even, right? So Tune Table of Contents, Ties of the Brethren, Double Summon, right? Photon Lead, Jar of Greed, Keck W, right? So you're gonna need a lot more draw spells. A lot more cards are gonna either plus you or draw you additional cards, so that you can activate your magical musket monsters on the first turn, with your opponent not having anything to get rid of, with Desperado or Negate with Last Stand, or Negate with Cross Dominator. But I wanted to go for a going second version, so I played the hand traps and then just a mass amount of the magical musket cards, and it worked out really well. I went on a 14-game win streak, which I can show you guys right now, and this was all with muskets. This was actually legitimately all with muskets. It was insane. It was yesterday's stream, and I will probably sometime this week or next week be finding replays to post. 4 more wins until Platinum 4. Why is it not showing my win streaks? Match history. It's not showing my streak. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 14, yeah. So I had a 14 win streak with Magical Muskets. 14 win streak. And I think that was starting from the first time I played the deck. I don't think that I was playing Magical Muskets here. Can you guys hear my cat? Grimmy, stop it. If you put the right cards in your deck, I believe that you could probably make it to Platinum with any deck. But there is a caveat. You have to make sure that your engine itself is relatively strong. And you also need to make sure that you are playing the best possible going second / hand trap cards, right? I think that every deck should be playing either some number of hand traps or board breaking cards. If you're not, you're legitimately throwing away games where you go second. I think that's a big thing that happens. A lot of people build their decks exclusively for going first. And that means that, for the most part, you are very likely to win your games going first, which is nice. But that means you have a 50% win percent. And then, from there, you lower this chance even more, because sometimes your opponent has the cards that allow them to play going second, and you do not. So they can play through your board, but you cannot play through theirs. See how that works? Usually when you build your deck exclusively for going first or exclusively for going second, there will be times where you just automatically lose the game. And that's what I think I really like about Magical Musketeers. Yes, I can review your deck right after this. That is something I really do like about Magical Musketeers. They have the capability and the flexibility of being able to go first or being able to go second. I want to show you guys a replay really fast before we move on to I guess another deck review, and then moving on to the other decks the other deck that I made to plot with that I want to profile for YouTube. I believe it was here. I want to show you this replay. Hey, what's up? How you doing, Creeper? How's it going, dog? How the fuck you going? This is possibly one of the worst openings I've ever had with Magical Musketeers, and it still ended up being a win because I could stick a Magical Musket monster and knew where to hand trap / interrupt my opponent. So as you see, we have no Magical Musket monster. Something that I said is a problem, right? So if you don't have a Magical Musket monster, even if you don't want to activate your desires, you don't want to activate your 1-for-1 or +1 spells, you just have to. So right here, I shotgun the Pot Desires. He doesn't have interruption. We still don't draw anything, but we do draw an Upstart Goblin. Using that Upstart Goblin, look at that. We got into Calamity. Probably the worst turn 1 Magical Musket monster. Legitimately. If I was playing a third dock and no Calamity, I would have been way better off here. Unfortunately, I didn't. I'm a dummy and I played Calamity, right? So we leave the Calamity on board and we pass our turn with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 potential interruptions in hand. Yeah, 2 days. It's been a while. Activates the Qinglong, We get it with last turn. Knowing it goes to the graveyard and that can banish itself made me a little worried. And I think he's gonna try to get a card here. We ash it, right? So unfortunately, for that one card, we spent 2 interruptions, which is really fucked up. Okay. He activates gates here. I have nothing to stop that because I already activated the last time, unfortunately. Then he tries to Lily with the Kieran, and I activate Desperado and pop this, knowing that he cannot summon Lily unless he can stick a Virtual World gate. I destroy the gate, Lily stays in hand. Summons the Hime. Makes it level 6, tries to crash into this because they're both 1500, so I no longer have a magical musket monster, which is the right play because I wouldn't have a monster anymore. Unfortunately, I can activate Magical Musket Cross Dominator during the last end to negate this monster's effect and lower its attack to 0, forcing it to still battle because it's during the damage step after everything's already. You can't take that attack back. Now this is a situation where I really just hope I draw a Magical Musket, and if I'm not mistaken, I do. Yeah, I draw the nuts, the absolute nuts. I draw Caspar, I activate Dancing Needle, banish his cards, just so we can get something off of off of Caspar, right? He does get a plus here, gets to put something back into his deck, and I think draw a card. Oh, no, he just gets to shuffle it back into the deck. No plus, right? So now we get the Desperado here. And then we attack with both. And then I think after that, I send off this Calamity here. Oh, I don't. That was interesting. Instead of sending off this Calamity, I send off the Caspar so I can summon it back off Calamity to make Max. Max is going to give me an additional monster to work with here. So now with the Max, I get Caspar back. Which, once again, was weird. I probably should have gotten something else. And there he goes, activating a spell, getting the gate. I immediately pop gate after special summoning back the Caspar, and the game's just over. The game's just over. Because he cannot stick a virtual monster. We're not allowing him to stick a virtual world monster. And it's that easy, right? That was one of the worst times I've ever had with this deck, and it still led to us beating a top meta deck with Magical Musketeers. Like I said, if you have the right cards in your deck and you play your deck right, you can still get W's. Anyways, if you're watching this on the YouTube, please feel free to like the video and subscribe if you want to see more Master Duel content. We're going to be putting out Master Duel content for all the weird decks that we like to play. Nothing too meta most of the time. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Peace.